Thank you, Lexi. I'm so excited to be here. I think parasites is such an interesting and very common topic that we get questions around. We see patients with parasites. So I'm super excited to talk to you guys about that today. Let me get ready to share my screen. So before we get started, I thought I would give you guys just like a couple of fun facts about parasites. So the CDC estimates that there are millions of Americans that are affected by parasites, but they can really go unnoticed or undetected because symptoms of parasites, which we are going to talk about, can overlap with other chronic conditions. Maybe a little bit difficult to tell when you first see a patient if you think that they have a parasite. We're going to talk about testing and all the things. But another interesting fact is that one fourth, a quarter of all infectious diseases are actually caused by parasites. That's pretty interesting. So, our job as providers is to be really great investigators in order to uncover these parasites and treat them appropriately. And so that's what I really want to focus on today. Okay, so what are parasites? Let's just start from the basics. What are parasites? The CDC defines a parasite as an organism that lives in or on a host and gets its food from or at the expense of the host, meaning that they harm the host in the process, right? Often we hear of parasites being called stealth infections. You may have heard that term before, or pathogens. And that just means that they can be present in the body. They can actually lie dormant for a very lengthy period of time without actually causing illness. They can evade the immune system and not be detected by the immune system so that our immune system isn't working for us trying to clear the body of these parasites. Just some basics of what the actual definition is. And again, if you've heard that term stealth infection before. But I want to now cover like what are the different types of parasites, just so you understand how they are categorized. So there are two main types of parasites. First is called the helminths. These are multicellular parasitic worms. So in this category, think pinworms, hookworms, tapeworms, roundworms, flukes. All of these would be in that helminths category. These live inside the GI tract, of course. Now, they can cause really long-term issues by depleting the body of nutrients, of energy. The most common way that that these are transmitted and that we're infected with them is through contaminated soil. So that's how most humans are infected with these types of parasites. Again, these are more of the worms. Most of them are from eggs that are in human feces that contaminates the soil. So it's usually in like poor sanitation areas. The most common type of this parasite is called Ascaris. It's actually a roundworm. That's the most common one. But what you will see probably actually more often is pinworms. Pinworms we see more commonly in children. And this can cause, you may be familiar with the symptom of anal itching. A lot of times we see that in children, which is usually worse at night. And the children often get pinworms from daycare, from school, and it's just from poor hygiene, basically. And then there are protozoans. And so these are microscopic, right? We're not going to be seeing these generally come out in the stool, whereas you may see some of the helminths, the worms in the stool. But these protozoans, these are microscopic, they're single cell parasite, and they're much, much harder to detect. So we really need good comprehensive testing to detect these, to know that they're present, and then to create an effective treatment protocol. Some examples of these protozoans would be things like Giardia, Cryptosporidium, Endomoeba histolytica. These are usually transmitted fecal oral route. And then there are also other types of protozoans that require a vector. So this would be like mosquito, like a mosquito bite, things like that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But that's a breakdown of the two main types of parasites. And this is just a picture, just showing you under a microscope what these would look like. Think the helminths are more the worms, and then the protozoans are again very microscopic. Let's talk a little bit more about how these parasites are actually contracted. So parasites in humans can be contracted through multiple ways. Consumption of contaminated produce, undercooked meats, water, anytime fecal matter that has parasites or cyst in them that contaminates water sources, that's a big way. So think swimming in a contaminated lake or river. Also think of a child who may have a parasite and an adult changing the diaper of the child and not using good hygiene and hand washing. That's another way that they can be transmitted. So, just really important things, obviously, when you're seeing patients to educate them about and try. And obviously, you can't always pinpoint how they came in contact, but you can ask some questions and maybe get an idea, especially if they have certain animals that are infected, things like that. You may be able to get a good idea. And that's important when you're educating clients so that they can avoid future contamination, of course. Again, some parasites, I mentioned just a minute ago, do require a vector to be transmitted to the host. And so this would be things like, again, like mosquitoes transmitting malaria, for instance, which obviously we don't see a lot of, but that can happen. Direct contact, as I mentioned, with infected animals. This can happen when we as humans handle these animals and come in contact with either their feces or even just the animal. This would be like a cat who has toxoplasmosis. You probably have heard of that. Maybe you haven't seen someone with it, but maybe have heard that before. And then again, contaminated soil. We talked about that with worms, especially that's the hookworms and then that ascaris that I mentioned earlier. They basically release eggs into the soil. And then if we come in contact with that soil, that's how we can get infection. And then you can get parasites through sexual contact. An example of this would be like trichomoniasis. That's actually a protozoan. So that's actually a parasite. So those are all sort of the main ways that we as humans can come in contact with and become infected with parasites. So now let's talk about what are some of the signs and symptoms that we might see in our patients who are potentially infected with parasites. You can see I have a whole list here. Of course, we think first digestive, right? This could be anything from diarrhea to constipation to nausea, vomiting to gas and bloating. For instance, blastocystis hominis is a common one that we see. I see more constipation with that parasite. Other things like Cryptosporidium, I see more diarrhea with that. So it can be different based on the actual parasite, but also the individual. It's not like a hard and fast rule. You're always going to have diarrhea with certain parasites and constipation with one. That's just typically what I see in clinical practice. Skin disorders. We know there is this huge gut skin connection, right? You may see things like eczema, chronic rashes, hives, unexplained itching, things like that. And this generally comes from the immune response that we get from the parasite. And then we get these skin reactions. Fatigue is very common. Constantly, one of the kind of the classic things is constantly feeling fatigue, lacking energy, even after a good night's sleep. So they may report, I'm always tired. Even when I wake up in the morning, I've slept 8 or 9 hours and I'm just still tired. Because remember, these parasites are using the body as a host, right? And so it's depleting nutrients and energy. Grinding of the teeth while sleeping, that's another one that is classically, you don't always see it, but it is a classic association with parasites. And you do see this more in kids. You would see that more in children. Nutrient deficiencies, as I mentioned, can certainly happen, especially anemia. Other things, anxiety. We know that, again, there's a huge gut brain connection. Muscle and joint pain. I do see a decent amount of joint pain. Could just be from inflammation. It could be from an immune response that leads to the development or even exacerbation of autoimmune conditions. So that can result in joint pain. And then I mentioned the anal itching that a lot in kids with pinworms. And then one that I didn't mention on here is weight loss. Sometimes we do see weight loss, unexplained weight loss. That can be a symptom of a parasitic infection. And these parasites, again, they consume nutrients from the host. And so that leads to weight loss despite adequate food intake. So they may report eating a lot, but I'm constantly losing weight. So that could be a clue to you that maybe you need to check for parasites. And so, how do we do that? What are some of the tests that you can utilize in practice to test if you do suspect a parasite? We're going to be testing parasites with a stool test, of course. Now, in conventional medicine, we would often run an O&P, or that's also known as an ova and parasite test. And this is just a very simplistic test that looks for parasites and their eggs. And it basically just involves looking under a microscope, and these results come back as positive or negative. It can be challenging. You're not going to be able to identify the specific parasite, the amount, or like a quantitative value of the parasite or parasites in the stool. This is just a yes, we see parasites, or no, we don't. And so that's very simplistic. That's often what you'll see in conventional medicine. Now, this is why we want to take a root cause approach and use root cause medicine to order a more comprehensive stool test, because you're going to get much more information and data that's going to help you in creating your treatment protocol and treating the client. So I'm giving you a couple of examples here. This first one, this stool parasitology, an example of that is one from doctor's data, parasitology. You can actually do a 1, 2, or 3 day sample. And all of these labs can be ordered through your RUBA dashboard. And if you're not already signed up, which I think you are if you're on this class, but just in case you're watching the recording and you're not signed up, super simple. You can go and sign up, and then you can see what all stool tests are available that you can order. So this first one, this parasitology, this looks at or uses PCR testing, and that just stands for polymerase chain reaction. So what does that mean? That means that this type of testing looks at the DNA of the organism. Okay. It's great technology. It doesn't quantify, it does look at the DNA of the organism and tell you what organisms are present. So that might be an option that you want to utilize. It's adequate if you want to know basically if the parasites are present, but you don't necessarily care how much of the parasite is present, and you don't want other information about the microbiome in general. If you're looking for that kind of data, then you're going to want to run a more comprehensive stool test. And I've given you two examples here of very common comprehensive stool tests. And I'll tell you the difference between these. The first one by Diagnostic Solutions Lab is called the GI map. This one uses quantitative PCR technology. So it's that same PCR technology where we're using the DNA of the organism to identify it, but it's quantitative, meaning that we get an actual reading number telling us how much of this parasite was found in the sample. So that could be really helpful to know, is this parasite in low numbers or at a low level, or is it really high? So that's nice to have that quantitative value. And Genova Diagnostics, they use PCR testing. It's not quantitative PCR, but they use PCR testing. They also use culture and microscopy. So they do use multiple methods there. Now, both of these, what's cool about the comprehensive stool testing, both of these, you're going to get additional information. So you're going to get information on intestinal health markers and digestive patterns, inflammation, immunity or immune response. So those are really cool things to have when you're putting together a protocol. Gathering more information is always going to be helpful to you in putting together a protocol for your client. So I love personally the comprehensive stool testing. That would be my personal preference. I did want to show you this, and it's a little bit too long for me to include on one screen, but I wanted to give you an idea of a really cool tool that if you haven't used this or seen this before, that you can find in your RUPA dashboard. You can go in and let's say you really wanted to compare stool testing. So you can go in to our lab comparison tool and you can add any stool tests that you want to. So I added these 3 that we just spoke about, that I just talked about. And what's cool is it will give you the breakdown. So you're not having to go to multiple labs and research, okay, what's the difference in the GI map and GI effects and the parasitology test. We break it all down for you. So if you go into your RUPA dashboard, you go into the lab comparison tool, you can see all of the information that you get. There is more information, but again, I couldn't include it all on one screen. So you can see the cost breakdown. You can see what type of sample it is. Of course, these are all going to be stool tests, and you can do this with any test. I'm just giving you the example of the stool test. You could do it with food sensitivity test. You could do it with different hormone tests, lots of different tests that you could compare and contrast. It will also tell you, you can view a sample report. So you can see what the report's going to look like when you get it back. It shows you there what the methods of testing are. It also, you can view testing instructions. So what are the instructions that the patient's going to get? You can see what the shipping time is, how long it's going to take, what the turnaround time is, so that you can tell your patient, we're going to expect to get your test back in about 14 days or in about 23 days. So that kind of, gives you great information to share with your patient. Um, and then if we were able to scroll down, there is more information that you get. Things like all of the biomarkers on the test. If you were curious, if do all of these test for blastocystis hominis, for instance, you can look at those biomarkers and you can see exactly what's included in each test. And if there's something specific that you're looking for, then you'll be able to see that. So really cool. I would highly encourage you to use this tool. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about some treatment options. I'm really going to focus more on these functional options, but I did want to mention for conventional treatment, typically it's going to involve one of these agents: metronidazole, albendazole, or mebendazole. And so all of these are anti-parasitic. They also work on some anaerobic bacteria as well, but those are probably going to be the most common options that you see. And then for functional treatment, I want to talk just briefly about each of these. So, wormwood is a very common one that we see utilized for parasites. It's also known as Artemisia. It is a broad spectrum antiparasitic, and it does have research showing and supporting that it does eradicate intestinal parasites. Also has some benefit in supporting healthy digestion in terms of stimulating gastric flow, stimulating bile, and also improving blood supply to the digestive tract. So you're getting some added benefits with that wormwood. Black walnut is another one that we see very commonly utilized. It has antiparasitic properties, of course, but then it also has some laxative effects. So think about if you did have a patient, let's say with blastocystis hominis, and they're very constipated, then maybe black walnut would be a great option because it has that laxative effect. So when we're creating protocols, of course, we're always wanting to look at, could I use one product that would support multiple things that the patient has going on, right? I think that's always important as practitioners to look at and think about. Next up is allicin. So allicin is is the antimicrobial component or compound of garlic. It has broad spectrum antimicrobial activity against not only parasites, but also against bacteria and fungi. This might be a really good option. Let's say you've performed a comprehensive stool test and your patient has candida and dientamoeba fragilis. a parasite in Candida. We know that allicin is really good, has antifungal properties. That might be a good option to use. Also, there is some research showing that it has been very successful in treating Giardia. So that is a parasite that you may want to, again, consider using allicin in. And allicin is actually, just of note, it's actually produced, or I should say released, really, when garlic is crushed or chopped. So basically, what happens there is that triggers this enzyme called allinase to convert allicin, which is like the natural amino acid in garlic, to allicin. So it activates that allicin. So incorporating raw garlic into foods, if patients want to do that, if they like garlic and they want to incorporate that, again, that has those anti-parasitic properties. So that would be great addition to the diet. Okay, next is Hollerina is the next herb. And this is actually the bark of an Ayurvedic plant. It's a medicinal plant that's been used like for centuries and centuries to treat a lot of ailments, including parasitic infections. Now, there are a lot of you probably know this as a practitioner. There are a lot of great products out there that are combination products that have a lot of these botanicals in them that I just talked about. I think when you're looking at a combination product, you just want to make sure that you do have a product that at least has one or more of these botanicals that have research or evidence-based data showing that they are effective against parasites. I think that's one of the most important things. And that's what we always want to be providing you all with, is the evidence-based data. Certainly there is clinical data as to maybe what you've seen work, but I think it's important to know what the evidence actually shows is effective. And then I also added probiotics on here because probiotics can kind of help prevent parasitic infections just by creating microbial diversity, right? So just having that healthy microbiome, we can ward off or prevent some parasitic infections. So that's always important to think about. Okay, nutritional considerations. So this is interesting. And there's actually data showing that a lot of these nutritional things that I'm going to talk about are effective. They're supported by data. There's not a specific diet for parasites, right? You may have seen or heard of there's a anti-candida diet. There's not like an anti-parasitic diet, but there are things that we can do and that we can educate clients on, things that we can incorporate into the diet and avoid that can be very supportive. So first, I would say that like a lot of pathogens, parasites thrive on sugar, alcohol, processed food, all the junk, right? So we really want to be educating on a whole foods, a low inflammatory diet, because these parasites can certainly cause a lot of inflammation. So maybe something like a Mediterranean diet, something that is lower causing, that's anti-inflammatory, that's lowering inflammation in the body, is going to be helpful. Garlic. I already mentioned garlic, but remember that it does have those antimicrobial and anti-parasitic properties. Pumpkin seed. Pumpkin seed has actually long been used as a natural remedy for parasites. Pumpkin seeds actually contain this amino acid called curcubitacin, I think is how you say it. Anyway, it's an amino acid. I may have butchered the name of it, but it is actually believed to paralyze these parasites and help eliminate them through the stool. So incorporating some pumpkin seed. Um, Papaya seed is also another good one. There was actually a study in 2007 that used this elixir that was made with air dried papaya seeds and honey. And this study used it in 60 kids who had intestinal parasites. And what they found was that 1 week after treatment, there was a 76% clearance rate of the parasite among those who took the elixir. That's pretty powerful. The seeds, again, contain enzymes called papain and carpain, and those have been shown to have antiparasitic properties. So that might be something else you want to have patients include. Pomegranates. Pomegranates are another one. They are very rich in antioxidants. They've become traditionally used for their antiparasitic properties. And some studies have actually shown that pomegranate extract does have antiparasitic properties. So, consuming whether it's fresh pomegranate or it's drinking pomegranate juice, that can provide some benefit. And then barberry. This is a plant that you can actually eat the berry of the plant. You found it more in Middle Eastern cooking, but again, studies have shown it has antiparasitic properties. So those are some good things to have your patients incorporate. Now, water is going to be extremely important, of course. Half your body weight in ounces of water at minimum, because we've got to be flushing the parasites out of the system. And incorporating more fiber is also going to be important. We want to make sure that our clients are having 1 to 3 regular daily bowel movements, or they're not going to eliminate the parasites, no matter what you do. We've got to make sure that elimination and detox pathway is open, which I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, because that's always a big question and a big concern is once we start to give these antimicrobials, antiparasitics, then if we're not making sure that the client's detox and drainage pathways are open, they're going to feel terrible and we're not going to be successful, most likely. And then also some prebiotics and probiotics. We can incorporate that just through the diet. Prebiotics, we can do things like bananas, garlic, onion, leeks, asparagus, artichoke. Those all have really good prebiotics in them. And then probiotics, think things like kefir, sauerkrauts, kimchi, kombucha, miso, things like that. So I think encouraging your client to incorporate those things is going to be really helpful. Okay, so before we talk about detox and how to support detox, let's first talk about how would you even know if your client is detoxing poorly? How would you know if maybe the detox and drainage pathways were clogged, were not open? These are some signs and symptoms. So certainly constipation, which obviously makes sense. We've got to be eliminating, right? The colon is a huge detox pathway. Other things though, like excessive cellulite on the body, edema, things like joint pain and stiffness, feeling of pressure and heaviness, especially in the extremities, the decreased ability to heal. So they're have injuries or they're getting sick a lot and they don't get well in a timely manner. It takes a long time. Fluid accumulation around the abdomen, difficulty sweating. Of course, sweating is our skin is a huge detox pathway. Not having a lot of energy, skin breakouts or skin conditions, and then brain fog. So those are signs to look for in your clients to see, do they have proper elimination pathways? Are they open and are they working effectively? And so I just wanted to give you first some ways that if you see any of those signs and symptoms in your client, how can you support that? What can you do to optimize detox and drainage pathways before you would want to do these things? You can do it alongside with an elimination, giving your antimicrobials, but it's really often I find very helpful to do this as a setup for that. So do some work ahead of time to ensure that these detox and drainage pathways are open. So first, the colon pathway. Things that we can do castor oil packs. You can have the client do those every day or a few days a week. Add in more fiber. Again, fiber is going to be really important. Minimum of 25 to 35 grams. Most people are not getting enough fiber. Have them track their intake for a week or two if they don't know, and maybe they don't want to start taking a fiber supplement, but we really need to know where they're at. So have them track that. Maybe you want to use MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or something, a tool like that. But a minimum of 25 to 35 grams, and I would say really needs to be on the higher end of that. Water, we mentioned, really have to make sure we're hydrating. Movement, so moving daily, even just walking, including some probiotics, including some fermented foods. All of these things are going to be supportive to our colon detox. Next, our liver and bile. How can we support liver and bile function? A couple of things. We can add in some supportive herbs, things like milk thistle, tudka, NAC, glutathione, things like that would be very supportive. We could also add in some liver detoxifying foods, things like lemon, bitter green, flaxseed, cruciferous vegetables, healthy fats. All of those are going to be very supportive. Then our lymphatic system. So, with our lymphatic system, this is one of the most, our lymph clears things out of the body, right? So, ways that we can support that are dry skin brushing, rebounding on a trampoline. Sauna is great if they have access to a sauna. Even just walking, massage is great. You can also have them do things like Epsom salt baths. That's also great. For the kidneys, making sure again that they're very well hydrated. They can add some lemon to their water, they can add trace minerals. There are certain botanicals that are also supportive to kidney function. NAC, milk thistle is actually supportive to kidney function. Parsley, beetroot, marshmallow root, those can also be very supportive to kidney detox. And then lastly, our cells and our mitochondria, of course, are very important. So getting that adequate sleep where our bodies really repair. So that's 7 to 9 hours of deep sleep. Getting daily sunlight, even morning sunlight is even better. It's going to help regulate our circadian rhythms. Daily sunlight, and then an anti-inflammatory diet. One thing that I didn't include on here that can also be helpful is hydrotherapy. So doing like cold baths or showers or plunges, things like that, can also be very helpful. So let's say, okay, we've done all of these things. You've made sure, because you're a great practitioner, you have made sure that these detox and drainage pathways are open because you've had them do some of these supportive things. And hopefully they worked, but you start your kill protocol or your eradication protocol, and they develop symptoms. How do you know if your client is having detox symptoms? The most common thing that you're going to see is going to be diarrhea, brain fog, fatigue, joint pain, headaches, flaring up of skin issues that were already there, or the development of new skin issues. And then, of course, bloating and gas. What I really find happens most often in these situations is their symptoms that they had worsen a little bit if they are going to get detox symptoms. Now, certainly fatigue and just no energy, that's fairly common. But a lot of times, if they already had loose stools, they tend to develop diarrhea, more loose stools. If they had bloating and gas, a lot of times that will get a little bit worse before it gets better. So I do think it's important to go ahead and tell them that up front. I don't always say you're probably going to experience these symptoms because you know how that goes. It's the power of suggestion. But a lot of times clients will ask, is there anything I should look out for? Or could I feel worse before I feel better? And then I will say, yes, that can happen. It's highly individualized. Everyone's body chemistry is different. We're not 100% how you're going to react to killing off this parasite. But the good news is these symptoms do not typically last very long. And I always tell them this is actually a great sign that what we're doing is working. While it's not pleasant, it's a great sign that what we're doing is working. And I have found that is often really all you need, or not you need, all the client need is to know, okay, I'm not making things worse. This is actually a normal part of the process. And that just calms down their anxiety a little bit. Now, might you have some clients that you have to adjust their protocol? Yes, some people are going to be more sensitive, and you might have to make some modifications. Sometimes just telling them, hey, this is a normal part of the process. It's probably not going to last more than a week. Then they're okay with that and they can deal with that. I did want to mention, because I know there's probably going to be questions around this in terms of detox symptoms. What's the difference in like those I'll just say general detox symptoms that I mentioned on the previous slide and an actual Herxheimer reaction. So a Herxheimer reaction, you can get the same symptoms, but it is an acute febrile illness. Basically, it starts generally 24 to 72 hours after you start the antimicrobials, the antiparasitics, generally resolves in about 3 to 7 days. It's more flu, again, typically have a fever, body aches, maybe some gastrointestinal symptoms. But we can do some of those supportive things like getting more sleep, hydrating, things like that to help them get through the process. But the reason that this happens is as we start to kill off these parasites, they basically release endotoxins into the body, into the bloodstream, and it occurs at a faster rate than the body can handle and can control. That's why this will happen. That's why they develop these type of symptoms. But again, really can be a normal part of the process. And I think it's just important to incorporate some of these supportive things and then make sure that you let the client know that this can be part of the normal process. So again, just to recap some ways that if those things do occur, things that you can do, really make sure they're hydrating. I always encourage clients in the beginning to increase their sleep by 1 hour if possible while they're undergoing a protocol, because that can really help with some of these symptoms. And they can be more fatigued anyway. Detox baths are great. I typically, for a detox bath, will recommend using Epsom salt, using apple cider vinegar, hydrogen peroxide, and baking soda. Those are great to do. They can do them every day if they want to. Again, working on that lymph flow and drainage if they have access to a sauna, just getting some gentle movement in every day, incorporating those castor oil packs, and then binders. Binders are another thing that we do often incorporate with these protocols, especially a parasite protocol. So there are lots of different binders out there, but you're probably so some of the most common herbals that are binding agents are things like activated charcoal, bentonite clay, chlorella is another one. Psyllium husk can actually be used as a binder. Apple pectin can be used as a binder. So look for products with those types of ingredients in them if you're wanting to use a binder, which does really help with symptoms. I find that it can be very supportive. And then as we wrap up, I did want to give you before we answer some questions, I did want to give you a couple of resources that you may not be familiar with. Maybe you don't even know that these exist. So the first one is when you're logged into Rupa, and I really don't think you even have to be logged in here, but you can go on to rupahealth.com and we have a magazine that has tons and tons of articles. We have this amazing staff of writers that go and research topics and write an article on it, link all of the research to it. So you're not having to do all of that on your own. So let's say you have a patient with Giardia. You can see down here, there's an article here specifically on Giardia. And this could be anything that you're looking for, not even just parasites, but I typed in parasites into the search and then took this screenshot just to show you how many articles there are on just parasites. And so in these articles, it's really cool because it breaks down not only treatment, so you can get treatment protocols. It shows you the evidence behind why is black walnut good for treating parasites. The evidence is right there. You can click on the actual research articles, but then it reviews the condition or the pathogen and just wraps everything up into this really nice summary. So I use these all of the time. I would highly encourage you, and you can also send these to your clients if you want to have them read about a specific parasite or condition that they have. You can also do that. And then lastly, I want to share with you a newer program that we have that we launched in January that has been really fun and exciting to be a part of. And that is our mentorship programs. We have a GI Health mentorship program. If you're looking to get more support on just gut health and patients that you're treating with GI issues in general, not just parasites, but other issues, we'd love for you to apply to the program. So, what you get, just quickly, I'll tell you what you get in this program. You get a weekly live Q&A. The cohorts are very small, so you're going to be coming in with other providers who have practices like you, who have the same struggles that you do, who are probably often feeling lonely like you, and just really looking to collaborate with other practitioners. Inside the group, each week, we review gut related topics. So we review things like SIBO, leaky gut, what probiotic is best for different conditions, how to wean off of a PPI. Those are just a few examples of topics that we cover. We also review cases. So we take these comprehensive stool tests. You can even, those that are in the mentorship, even bring their own cases and we review them together like a roundtable discussion and help to create protocols for our clients. And then we also cover business related content. So, how to grow and scale your practice. We have special guests come in. Some of the topics that we've had, and all of these are recorded, but some of the topics that we've had and have coming up are the gut brain connection and vagal nerve techniques that you can use with your clients, how to open detox and drainage pathways, treating patients on a budget, pharmaceutical and botanical interactions and contraindications. So lots and lots of really great content. So you can head over. I think Lexi's going to put this in the chat, the link to this page on the website, and you can head over and apply if that's something that you're interested in.
Welcome to Rupa Health, the best place to order, manage, and track results from over 30 different lab companies in one single place for free. It's going to take you under 2 minutes to sign up, and you can order any functional medicine lab for your client in under 30 seconds. Let me show you how it's done. So here's our beautiful interface. I'm typing in the name of my client, selecting the lab that I want to order for them, and hitting send. From there, Rupa and their amazing team handle the rest. They email the client, collect payment, and even offer an interest-free 3-month payment plan. We've also built the world's largest library of information about chronic health conditions, the lab tests that can help you find the root cause, and the evidence-based interventions that you can use to help people heal from them. It's called the Rupa Health Magazine. There, we have in-depth articles about almost any health condition you can imagine. And we give you step-by-step protocols that other clinicians have used to help their clients heal and that are verified by evidence-based sources. You should totally check it out, and it'll transform your practice. And we can't wait to see you. So make sure you sign up today at rupahealth.com.